welcome to our second Cambridge Early Years webinar. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm Georgia Robinson from Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and today's speaker will be Early Years author and International Education Advisor, Dr Alison Borthwick. So that's all from me. I'll now hand you over to Alison to begin the webinar.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Georgia, and thank you, Tamsin. And a really big thank you to Cambridge for inviting me to do this webinar. And it's so great to see so many people from around the world with me today. So I really do hope that you have a really interesting webinar. Do think about any questions that you would like to ask me as we go through. So the format is that I'm going to talk for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then that will give you an opportunity to ask any questions at the end about Cambridge Early Years. But also I do have an eye on the chat box. So if there's anything pertinent that's coming up as I'm talking, I will try and answer questions as we go along. So thank you very much for that welcome. Just reiterate, so I am an international maths education advisor. I am zooming in today from a very rainy England on the east in Norwich, but that is not going to dampen my spirits at all. I've been really lucky to, I've been in education for, I think I calculated 33 years, and I've been really lucky to work with Cambridge since 2011. So I have worked in over 25 countries. Do say hello if I have worked with you over the past several years. So although I'm based in the UK, I have a really good understanding of what happens internationally, and particularly with early years, primary and lower secondary, which is where I tend to work. In terms of early years, I lead on several international projects, both here in the UK and abroad. I run some of the national UK programmes, and I've also been really lucky to work with Cambridge in lots of different ways, developing what I do consider to be a most amazing early years curriculum. So what are we going to do today? Well, you can see the title on the screen. We are going to be focusing on what does a good early years environment look like? Because it's very different, isn't it, to what another type of phase environment would look like. And this is often one of the questions we are asked a lot. So, you know, we've got early years, what should it look like? So what are we going to think about covering today? I'm going to give you some general provision about things to think about for your learning provision. Now, I'm going to give you the gold standard. And I know that, you know, you will be able to kind of really think about, but what if I don't have the space or the budget to do things or all of those things? So really think about, in the long term, what is it you want to look for your environment? So there are lots of general provision there. We'll also address this thing that we call continuous provision. So hold that thought. I am coming back to that in a few slides' time. And of course, we'll just remind ourselves about the safety and the protocols that we need to think about in terms of making our environment safe for our youngest learners. But first, I have a task for you. Let's zoom straight into an early years classroom. So here we go. What I'd like you to do, have a look and pop into the chat box. What do you notice? Anything that you're surprised about, anything that you want to ask about. But this is a genuine early years environment. And this was actually a setting that 4 and 5 year olds were in. So have a look, anything that you want to notice, anything that surprised you about that. Brilliant. So we're off. So it looks like a bedroom. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? Absolutely. I wonder what their theme was. Lots of different colours, definitely. Oh, love that one. Looks like a pretend play corner. Yeah, could be role play. Oh, no books. Maybe the books are in the chest. Don't know. Maybe they're under the pillow. Good one. A favourite place for a child. That's really lovely, isn't it? Really interesting. People have started to pick up that the numbers are around the edge. So is this mathematical? But then we've got some books, and we've got some prompt cards. So maybe it's more literacy. Maybe it's something else to do with social and emotional. Looks like we're in the sky. I love that one. Really, really nice. Very imaginative. So we're getting a sense already that this is a very different look, potentially, to what we might be used to looking for with primary and lower secondary. So really lovely. I must have a fantastic audience, because the chat box is just going really kind of, it's really kind of, you know, rolling. So brilliant. Keep those comments going. But I'm going to move on. So here are some things to think about. And again, you've got a really lovely photo, again, from a real life setting. This was only taken about 3 weeks ago, so it's a very genuine setting. But things that I want you to think about. So when you're thinking about your early years space, indoor, outdoor, whatever your space is, does it really reflect how you want your youngest children to learn? Does it have that vision? So sometimes it's really interesting to start with, what do you want your early years environment to look like, to offer? What do you want it to do? And does it reflect that? It's a really interesting one. Nothing comes together by accident, but this is really about that careful planning of, so why do I want to put that set of trays there? Why do I want to put this table here? And if you notice on the photograph that actually the kind of the unit that is kind of the closest to us in the foreground is actually, it's not straight, it's been turned. And that is very, very deliberate on the part of this teacher to start creating zones and kind of places for the children to go around. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then, of course, does your environment offer that rich, that meaningful, and that playful experience for children? And you'll get a sense of what we really think our environment should start to represent here at Cambridge. So is it that rich? Is it really working for you? Does it have meaning? Not meaning to you as the adult, but meaning to the children, because they are the ones that are going to be really using it. And again, there's some lovely things coming in the chat box about, you know, sometimes, you know, having a spatial room, kind of making sure that it has lots of impact, having safe furniture. I love that, you know, a round table that kind of is appropriate for interactions. So lots of things to think about as we are going through. Who owns the environment? And in early years, it should be your learners. So we're going to really, what that kind of means is that your environment is absolutely linked to how your children learn. And in fact, we could almost think about your environment as being an extension of a teacher. So we're going to really look at that idea that the adults in the room play a part, but your environment is as important as what those adults are doing. So again, kind of what people are saying in the chat box, really making sure that everything is purposeful. Why did you put that table there? Why did you put those numbers there? Why did you put your collection of books over here? And is it working? So just a little kind of useful checklist for you to go through. I've got a few of these as we go through the webinar for you today, and you'll be able to look back when you have this recording. So things to think about. We want to be able to offer all of our children that dynamic and that hands-on learning opportunity. And that's because we know, the research tells us and the evidence tells us, that even our youngest learners need to be learning actively. So that idea about being very active, not passive, so that we need to make sure that our environment is enabling our children to be able to do that. We need to make sure that we have different and a variety of experiences, because our curriculum is different in early years. It's much more holistic. When we move into primary and lower secondary, we have our different segregation of subjects. In early years, we have them much more holistically, often through a theme, so that the children are experiencing mathematics and they're experiencing communication and language and literacy and social and emotional and physical development. All of those things that make up our early years curriculum should be in the environment to provide that holistic experience. And then, of course, it's no good if the children don't want to be in there, is it? So we really want to make sure that it is meaningful for the children so that they can start to actively use that play-based approach. Again, it's a very different pedagogy than perhaps we might see in primary and lower secondary. And then, of course, we also want to be able to stand in an environment and be able to really kind of identify what is it that the teacher is focusing on, either for that day or for that week. So I know when I go to an environment, and when I go and do an audit, for example, one of the things I look for is I stand in the middle of the environment. In fact, I often don't stand. I often go onto my knees, because that's then at the height, the level of children. And I look to think about, okay, where are all of the children? You know, why are they going over there? What is it that's so exciting that makes the children want to go there? Hang on, there's nobody over here. Why not? And it might be the most exciting area that we think of, but if the children are not going there, then we need to rethink it. But I also want to be able to think about, if I go there, can I access mathematics? If I go there, can I access mark making? Or can I be looking and drawing on my musical abilities or my craft or my physical development? So I'm looking that the environment is offering that holistic experience. But I'm also thinking, I think you are focusing on patterning in your mathematics. And the reason I'm saying that is I can see that actually you've got some specific patterning activities here and here. So the environment is reflecting what it is that you are also teaching. So there's a lot to think about with your environment. Hopefully you're getting the idea that this is as important as your teaching part within your early years. It really helps to secure what we would call the development and the progression of skills. So again, thinking about, so is the space offering those best opportunities and those conditions for learning? Is it creating those habits of mind, those characteristics that we really want our young children to be able to have a go at and get better at? And then thinking about, so how can I create those spaces where children are feeling empowered? And again, this is really hard to do as an adult, because we often don't think like children. We think like adults. I remember in one of my earlier settings, I created the most amazing role play area. It was all to do with dogs. It was one of the children, some of the children were really kind of interested. I think a few of them had got some pets, etc. So I really went to town. I built this role play. We had dog biscuits, we had dog animals, we had like a kennel. It was amazing. Did any of the children go there? No, because I had built it. I'd decided what was going there. I'd even decided where it was. It wasn't meaningful. It didn't empower the children. So my question to you is, what has been your most popular space, your most popular kind of zone currently in early years? So I'm going to just give you a minute. So if you are in early years currently, where are the children going to at the moment? What is their kind of current kind of most popular choice? I will pause there. Oh, role play. Yes, they do love role play. What type of role play is it? Play area, kitchen. They do like the home corner, don't they? Role play can be so many different things. I thought my role play with my, building the kennel and the dogs was amazing, but the children didn't think so. Hot air balloon. Gosh, I want to be in that classroom. Oh, circle time. That's nice, isn't it? Again, some more play areas. Really interesting, isn't it? Children are telling us how they like to learn. They love to play. And actually that playful learning, that play-based approach is so important. Oh, there are so many lovely ideas in the chat box. Blocks and puzzles, absolutely. Mark making areas, really important to have those out, isn't it? And milking the cow, I love that. Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it? You are obviously much better at setting up your environments, hopefully because you're involving the children as well. So again, it's that final question, isn't it? Are the spaces that I've provided, are they appealing? Do children return over and over and over again? I think that's, again, a really, really interesting point. So I mentioned at the beginning, we were going to think about that general guidance. So let's have a little think about that general guidance, although I'm now really distracted by the chat box because I think I just want to come and visit all of your settings. Doctors in the hospital, a calm down area, music area, hands-on, brilliant. Great audience. Okay, so let's have a little think. I've got another question for you. So what do you need to think about with your environment? What do you need to think about? What kinds of things do we think? Now, I've already given you some ideas, so let's again pop them in the chat box. Imagine you've got, oh yeah, we're off. All right, I don't need to say more, do I? Safety, child-centric, thinking like a child, absolutely. It's really hard to do when you're an adult. Oh, overstimulation, that's really interesting. Sometimes we can make it too busy, can't we? Good one, good spot. Making it interesting, having open corners. Yeah, really nice, isn't it? Sometimes we want that open corner so we can kind of have that flow. Sometimes we want to make sure that actually children crawl into a tent or kind of go through some kind of hanging material. Some really good things here. So you've all picked up on the fact that we absolutely need to make sure that it's a safe learning environment. Brilliant. We'll come back to that at the end. We also need to make sure that it's holistic, so that actually it is covering all elements of our curriculum. And again, I can see that that has been popped into the chat. Lots of people have said that it's about being child-centric, child-friendly. And I think what we also mean by that is having that play-based approach. So we probably wouldn't expect to see lots and lots and lots of tables and chairs. We would have some tables and chairs, but actually not all children want to sit at a table and chair all of the time. That's for later on when they move into primary and lower secondary. We want to make sure that they can lie on the floor, they can go to the home area, they can go outside if you're lucky enough to have outside provision and use the bikes and the trikes. So holistic provision is really important about thinking about your environment, making sure that we've covered all subjects, but making sure that within that we've identified what it is that the children really are interested in. Making sure it's play-based, which definitely enables the children to be actively learning. Obviously exciting. Lots of you said that. Colourful, catchy, exciting. So what is it that really excites the children? Again, it's often different to what excites adults. So again, thinking like a child. Remembering that there are different types of play. So when we're thinking about play-based, making sure that we have got physical play, we've got pretend play, symbolic play, playing with objects and having the games with the rules. So making sure that we've covered those 5 different aspects of play. Also making sure that if we have got different areas, inside, outside, or kind of corridors or whatever it is, we're utilising them all. And finally, thinking about those other characteristics that we want to really promote, things like self-regulation, agency, and having those social interactions as well. Some brilliant things coming through the chat box as well. So thank you very much for all of those. I could also give you all very happy faces as well in the chat box. Some great emojis coming through there as well. So we've kind of thought about our environment. Let's now think about resources. So I know it's really hard, isn't it, in terms of money and budgets. So we really need to think about what resources do we want to put into our environment. And usually when I go to early years settings, there's a whole kind of cupboard that the children don't have access to. that have lots of resources in, because what the teachers are doing is constantly swapping the resources around. So it could be that this week we have the block play out as part of our construction, but then the block play is taken away and the Lego goes into that construction area. And then the following week, something else replaces it. So it's about making sure, what have we got available? So thinking about why have you chosen particular resources? So again, just remembering that we're trying to make sure that we've got that holistic provision, but it doesn't mean that everything has to be out for that holistic provision. What am I going to put out for mark making? What am I going to put out that was different from last week, or building on that trajectory, building on that progression? How are the resources supporting learning across? Again, there's that really important one, that holistic provision. So all areas of the curriculum, making sure that we're not particularly over heavy, over dominant in one of our areas. And then again, really interesting, isn't it? So, you know, we've got lots of resources, but do they appeal to the children all of the time? And I saw somebody had put in the chat box a little while ago about, you know, the importance of diversity, but also inclusion. So making sure that we are absolutely choosing resources that the children are responding to. And I don't know about you, but do you find that sometimes, you know, with one cohort of children, they love, I don't know, they love Lego or whatever it is. So you put that out again for your cohort next year, and they don't go near it. And you think, well, why not? You know, children love it. But actually, that's not, we can't really generalize, can we, with resources? Actually, it's about being able to say they love it, but then we might need to put something else in. But I do take your point that we have to work with the resources that we have available. So sometimes it's about presenting those resources in different ways. So I think that's also kind of an interesting one to think about. So I've just got a little checklist here for you. In fact, I've got 10 points. I'm going to show you the 10 points, and let's have a vote. Let's, in the chat box, when I've shown you all 10, I want everybody to choose just one. That's really hard, isn't it? I know, but just choose the one that you think is the most important. So here we go. Wait till I've revealed all 10. So is it about age appropriate, child-centered, safe, open-ended creative, allows children to make choices, play independently, take responsibility, develops more than one skill at a time, promotes collaboration, promotes children's own interests, multisensory, or durable? Okay, which one are you going to pick? What do you reckon? I mean, there's no right answer. Oh, people are going through it, lots of all of them. I like that. You're definitely teachers. We're not just following the rules. We're doing on. Oh, we've got lots, haven't we? Yeah, really interesting. I love people going, well, it could be 4 and 5, or it could be 2 and 8, or it could be 4's coming up. We've got 5 as well. All of them. Yeah. Oh, 8 to 9. Love that kind of mathematical notation going on there. Or yeah. It I like that. 3, 5, 8, 9. 3 and 5. Yeah, brilliant. It makes you think, doesn't it? It's kind of obviously all of them, but when we are choosing them, it's kind of a really good checklist, isn't it, to make sure that at some point we have got all of those covered. But I thought we'd just do that. It was a bit of a mean question, but you get the idea, and you will have this, so you'll be able to use this checklist and kind of think, are they age appropriate? And again, as I was saying a few minutes ago, it might be that they were age appropriate for a group of children last year, but this year they don't seem age appropriate, or they don't seem to want to play with them. Children are children, and thank goodness they are. But again, really nice one. Okay. The other thing that I said that we would talk about is continuous provision. So I want to just give you the kind of the definitions that we are using at Cambridge. You might have slightly different definitions for this. That's absolutely fine. But let's just kind of, you know, let's think about when we talk about continuous provision, what do we mean? So I think it's fair to say that there's kind of two types of provision. This is kind of the provision that you have in your environment. There's what we call continuous, and then we have opportunities where we enhance the provision in a temporary way. So let's look at continuous. I'm going to pause and just let you read that definition. Now, I know I'm talking gold standard here, so I do appreciate that lots of you will have a very small environment, a very limited environment, but we're just thinking big. We're thinking, what could our environments look like in the future if we're not quite there yet? So the continuous provision means things that you would have out all year, but it doesn't mean that the resources stay the same. So for example, we would have a home area probably all the time. We would have, if we are able to, mark making, an outdoor area, a mathematical area. So you kind of have these zones, these areas, these spaces that you would have out all the time. Does that make sense? Then we might enhance the provision for a couple of reasons. We might enhance it because we might add in or take away some resources. So we might change it in some way. We also might enhance it to reflect what it is that we're teaching. So I talked a little bit about that earlier. So if, for example, I'm doing a week on pattern within my mathematics provision, I might not always have patterning resources out all of the time. So when I'm doing my week on pattern or my 2 weeks on pattern or whatever it is, I'm going to do some direct teaching with the children, hopefully excite them so that when I put those patterning resources into my provision, I'm enhancing it so that the children can then reflect and continue the learning when they are in their free play. So that's kind of one of the ways that we try and adapt our provision. It also might be that because perhaps I've created a pattern station because I'm doing some work on pattern, it might be that I then I'll take that down and I'll make it something else. But next time I reinstate my pattern station, I might not have it here. I might move it somewhere else. So sometimes enhancing your provision is about moving it around as well. Because if children don't go, I don't know, you can see the washing line with the socks on it in the photo. If they don't go to that washing line, maybe it's just in the wrong place. Maybe it's not just because they don't like it. Just might be that it's not an area of the classroom or the setting that they go to. So here are some examples, and they are only examples of areas that you might want to think about including in that continuous provision. So these are zones, areas, spaces that you would have out all year round. Lots of you have said a home area. And the home area can change, can't it? So if we go back to that, the bedroom photo that I showed you very early on, that could be a home area. Sometimes we think home area has to be a kitchen. It doesn't. It could be a kitchen. It could be a bedroom. It could be a bathroom. It could be a lounge, a seating area. But we would try to have some form of home area all year round. We'd have role play. And again, lots of you said about role play. In fact, I want to come and see some of your role play. It sounds super exciting, but it could be that the role play is a vets, or it could be the role play is a theatre, or again, how do we decide on the role play? Well, there's two things we decide. One, we think about what the children's interests are. And the other thing, we look at the theme that we are doing for perhaps that half term, and we might reflect the theme within the role play. We would definitely have somewhere where we could access books. So it could be a book corner. Sometimes the book corner, it could be a book tent or a book table or a reading den or a reading area, but somewhere that the children can go and get books from. We would also have a mark making area or a writing area that of course could be as well as it could be the same as an art and craft area. If your space is limited, you might need to make your zones kind of, multi-purposeful. You might have, hopefully, a sand area, because we know children love digging and playing in the sand and building things and looking for treasure. Such a good area, isn't it, to have a look at. We might have a water area. Again, this water area, it could be just a little tiny washing up bowl. It could be quite a big kind of water area where we're looking at lots of different things. It could be somewhere outside where we've attached drain pipes and children are shooting things down a drain pipe to see where they go to. Absolutely agree with you. Children adore sand and water, don't they? Somebody's popped that in the chat box. Oh, I love the idea of a music room. I haven't got that on my list, but as I say, this is just some examples. A music area, absolutely lovely. It could be that you have a nature area or a construction area. So you get the idea that you would have lots of different things. Yeah, brilliant. A block area. Somebody's just popped into the chat box. So this list, you see, you're all off again. It's amazing. A scribbling corner, a dancing area. I want to come to all of your areas. So you get the idea that look at your environment and then zone it. Think about, what is it can I get in? So here are some things. You might have a counting corner. You might have a dinosaur den, a zoo role play, or even a builder's yard. And these are all examples of areas that I have seen in action in the classroom. And in fact, the photo that I'm showing you was from the zoo role play. So the children, I think this was a particular school who had been out to visit. They'd had a visit to a zoo or an animal farm. And the children came back and they're all obsessed with lots of different animals. And the teacher then set up in the construction area, because you can see that we've got the Lego out, the children had to make, I can't remember whether she said beds or kind of dens or areas for the animals. And here you can see what we would call a very long sausage dog. And the children are building kind of a zone for this dog. So that's kind of how it works. So I've talked a lot about zones, and I think, one of the ways that we can include lots of the different areas because of our holistic curriculum is to zone it. So sometimes when you look at a zone, you think, oh, well, is that the book area? But actually, it could be the book area and the mark making area, and it could have some role play in it as well. So a zone doesn't just have to be one kind of area for one thing. You can make it work however much space that you have. I think you've already mentioned these, but again, just so that we are mentioning all of our areas. Think about your digital resources. We are definitely moving into a digital age. We know that. So making sure that we've got cameras, iPads, floor robots, if you've got them, that type of thing. We're using the computer, really helpful. We've already mentioned, I think, music and games and puzzles. And of course, things to develop those fine motor skills. So having the tweezers to pick up things, threading beads, that type of thing. So again, just a quick checklist. What do you want your environment to do? So is it going to reflect a particular theme? Are you really wanting to support it for a particular learning statements, or is it trying to reflect children's current interests? Is it all of the above? Lots of things to think about. We've mentioned quite a lot that, our philosophy, our pedagogy within the Cambridge early years curriculum and framework is very, very much about that play-based approach. We know this because it's in all of the research, it's in all of the literature. We know that when children play, it is when they are learning most effectively. So that playful activity really does, we can really see the impact on children's learning. So it's really thinking about, have we got those open-ended activities, what we might call low threshold, high ceiling, so lots of children can access them, but at their own level. Being able to try out different things and come up with different solutions. Really, really nice. And that idea that we can have a go, we're building resilience, we're building agency, we're kind of developing that self-regulation, and it's all in a very emotionally and physically safe environment. So just a really kind of couple of words to say on that safe learning environment. There's a few things that we need to think about, and I know that you will be thinking about these anyway. So of course you will need to think about having in place a whole setting safety policy that all adults know about. That includes, for example, safeguarding in your e-safety and that type of thing, making sure that you follow any national or regional policies. But it's about kind of supporting that risk taking. We don't want to make an environment super, super, super safe, because otherwise children don't develop that risk taking. They don't have that self-regulation. Of course, we want to make it inclusive for all children, develop their own decision-making skills and empower them. So we want children to kind of make a decision that thinks, well, if I do that, I might not feel safe. And then encouraging them to take those risks in a very safe way. So there's just some words at the bottom that hopefully are really helpful. So identify what, for example, your hazards might be. Decide who might be harmed and how. Evaluate what the risks are and take those precautions. Write down any findings, record them, and implement them, and then of course monitor and review. So it's just a nice little checklist just to make sure that your environment is super safe. Okay, so finally we are coming to the end. I hope that you've got lots of questions for me in the chat box, and it just leaves me to say, have fun, be creative, and really, I would love to hear about your environments. But there's been some brilliant interactions in the chat box. So thank you very much. I am going to hand back to Georgia, and I look forward to taking your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison, for that fantastic presentation. I'm sure our audience found it very useful, and it was excellent to see such great interaction from everyone today. So before we move on to the Q&A, I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to a couple of things that may be of interest today. So firstly, a quick reminder that Cambridge Early Years is the first stage on our Cambridge pathway for learners aged 3 to 6 years old. Our approach is centered around play-based learning, and our program helps give learners the best start in life. So please do visit our website for more information on that. We also offer more support for setting up your early years environment as part of our program on the School Support Hub, with videos and further reading, and also inside our teaching resources with our continuous provision and guided play feature. And our teaching resources are available as part of the program fee and can also be purchased separately. Next slide, please. So if you enjoyed the webinar today, we have a fantastic array of professional development support available. This includes our free Getting to Know Cambridge Early Years webinars, as well as more in-depth courses with a smaller number of attendees, so you can work closely with other teachers to develop your understanding and share all of your wonderful ideas. So we'll include links to all of this information in the follow-up email for you. Okay, so now it's time for our Q&A. If you have questions you'd like answered, make sure you post them in the Q&A box before the session ends. So we're going to go to our first question now, which is, hi, are there any specific colours that are best to be used in the classroom to avoid overstimulation or has better effects on the children?
Interesting question. I think it's a really interesting question. So thank you very much for asking it. I think the research is kind of, it's still out. So there's a lot of research that says that kind of paring back on the colours and not kind of overstimulating the children is really effective. So some classrooms that I go into have kind of gone for the sort of the Hessian kind of background and kind of quite calm and controlled and not overstimulated. And that seems to work for some children. Other classrooms I go in, it's kind of like full on, lots of colours. So I think the answer is it kind of comes to what is working for your children. Certainly, we do know that once things have been like put on the wall, for example, or kind of positioned in certain places, after a little time, they become what we call wallpaper, so children don't see them. So I think rather than kind of say about whether specific colours are kind of more impactful than others, it's more about looking at your environment and thinking, well, if something's been on the wall for 6 weeks, really children are not noticing it. So take it down, move it around. And certainly what I would recommend is that you build up your environment, particularly your wall space, but you build it up gradually with the children as well. So that actually what happens is they don't come in and it's kind of like, whoa, you know, that there's almost too much to look at, because we do know that can kind of, it can hinder some of the children. It's too much. So my advice would be start quite small and almost say to the children, you know, George has done the most amazing painting. Where should we put this? Where, you know, should we hang it on the washing line? Should we put it over here on this wall? So really involving the children and building it up gradually would be my advice. But certainly, I think, you know, think about what provision or what experiences your children have had at home as well, because, you know, if they haven't had that riot of colour and overstimulation, then maybe they need that. But equally, if they have, then pare it back. So it's kind of a no but yes, but no but yes answer. But hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Alison. I really like the idea of getting the children involved in the environment as well. I think that's so important for them. So our next question is about limitations that our teachers can face sometimes. So this question says, how can we cope if all of these questions of contextualized planning and objectives are being thought about by the teacher, but the school limits her to use printed materials instead of handmade materials for the children, to which they can relate to and is more tactile? And for a bit of context, they say they're asking this as a visual arts teacher for early years and primary. So if you've got any advice there, Alison, perhaps way to get school leaders on board with a more kind of creative environment for our learners.
Yeah, thank you. And again, thank you very much for the question. It's a really valid question. I think, you know, as I said at the beginning, early years provision and pedagogy is very different to primary, lower secondary, upper secondary pedagogy. So I think the first thing to do is to involve your senior leaders and to really, you know, see if they can come and attend, you know, some of these webinars. There's lots of PD provision that Cambridge are providing, but really understanding that in order for our youngest learners to learn most effectively, and this is not just Cambridge, this is all of the international research out there, because Cambridge are very good and they have drawn down on the international research. We know that children need a play-based approach. They need to develop their own resources. So if a worksheet or a resource is being given to them, they don't have ownership. They don't have empowerment. It's not theirs. It's much better, as you're saying, to kind of develop it with the children, to have that kind of that handmade resource as opposed to a printed. So my advice is to talk to SLT. They are also on the journey as much as we are. But, you know, there's also some really good research articles that you can read on the public facing part of the Cambridge website as well. So I think this is about, you know, knowledge is power, involve people in the current early years research. And again, you know, look at the evidence. The evidence says children learn more effectively if it's play-based, active learning, and it empowers them.
Thank you, Alison. That was great. I'm just going to pause here for a moment because we have a special guest with us. We have Eddie Rippeth, who is our head of primary and early years publishing. He's been doing lots of research for our new resources that are coming in the new year. And I'm just introducing Eddie because I'm going to come to you for this question next, Eddie, just to let you know. So this one is all about teacher-learner ratio. So what teacher-learner ratio would you advise for an excellent and effective early years classroom? So Eddie, coming to you first on this one for some advice. And you're on mute, Eddie.
I think what's coming through and looking at all of the questions is very much the idea that it's a 25 to 30 students is a way too high a ratio, and it must, really it is. You would really want to get it down as low as you can. In terms of, I've been doing a number of classroom visits as part of my part of the research into this. I certainly don't have Alison's skills as a teacher or background in the early years, but it really, you want to try and get it, certainly get it below 10 to the single practitioner. It might even be a different number, and I'd be really keen to find out from Alison what her thoughts are on this. But certainly we did find schools where we just felt that maybe there was just too many children for the teacher in that particular environment. But this is where hopefully the Cambridge approach can help and show schools how they can sort of improve their learning environments, but also their methods of teaching in these learning environments.
Thanks, Eddie. Do you have anything to add on this point, Alison?
Yeah, I mean, we all want the magic answer, don't we, on this one? And I mean, obviously, the smaller class size, the more you're going to be able to interact with the children. I mean, that just goes without saying. But equally, we work with what we have, don't we? So I think there's a couple of things to think about in terms of this ratio, because we are thinking about adults to children ratio. But remember, we've just done a webinar on the environment, where what I've been saying is that your environment is also a pseudo teacher as well. So if you set up your environment in an impactful, powerful way, okay, I know it can't necessarily, talk in words and support the children through guided play, etc., but it can help in those situations. The reason that we kind of want smaller class sizes in early years than we perhaps do in primary and lower secondary is that we don't keep the children with the adult all of the time. So because some of these children are very small, they could be 3, 4, 5 years old. So we would have them with us and do what we might call direct teaching, only for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we let the children go. And at that point, they go into that provision, which is why your provision is so important. So once they go, the reason that, having more adults to kind of have a better ratio is that when the children go to their various zones, adults can be satelliting around and kind of going, oh, that looks interesting. Can you tell me what you're doing? Or, oh, I wonder if we can do something here. So I guess we work with what we have, but certainly if we can have smaller class sizes, what it does is it allows the adults to be supporting in a guided, kind of interactive way when the children are playing.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Eddie, for that helpful insight. So our next question is, we have small classrooms that cannot accommodate this type of learning environment. However, we do want to administer as much as we can. So what are the most important areas that we should focus on implementing in a small classroom? And Alison, I'll come to you first on this one.
I think it's about making each part of your classroom, your setting, it's kind of making it kind of work in 2 or 3 different ways. So with an early years curriculum, you absolutely need to implement, all of the curriculum. So again, have a look at the 6 areas of the curriculum within the Cambridge framework. And what we've actually done with the resources is that we have the communication and language and the mathematics. and then we've subsumed the other 4 areas into kind of an umbrella term that we call Let's Explore, which allows you to kind of see how the theme that you are developing could draw in 4 different subjects. So I think that would be really helpful. So I think the resources that we have for you will really help. You might not be able to have a home area and a role play area and a book, those kind of things. So for example, you could develop the home area as the role play area. You know, if you can't have sand and water at the same time, have sand for a couple of weeks or half a term, and then change it so that the sand area becomes the water area. So I think it's about looking across the year to make sure that over the course of the year, your environment does accommodate all subjects, but it doesn't have to accommodate it every day, every week. I think that would be my advice.
Thank you, Alison. Eddie, do you have anything to add on this topic?
I don't think I could add anything more to what Alison said. I think that's a great answer.
She's done such a great job, hasn't she?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So in my classroom, we have a digital board rather than a traditional whiteboard or blackboard. Do you think this has an effect on children's learning ability? Eddie, we'll start with you on this one. Do you have any thoughts on this topic?
I would probably say it's down to how you use the digital and the whiteboards. Clearly, yeah, there are opportunities for engagement. I think this is one of the things about the digital aspect is it can engage a child, and if you know what you want to use it for and you're using it well, it's a great asset. I think one of the things, and I'm sure Alison would say here though, is I think a wonderful opportunity about the early years environment is the variety, so that it's not just about what's on the whiteboard, but it's also about all of the work and I said work, a terrible word, playstations that we've been talking about, and the sand pits and going and having that sort of variety that children can do things. And obviously there's a really important element of tactile and physical play involved, which you can't do with a digital screen. So it's all about using the digital within the context. It certainly can be a great benefit and of great utility, but it's part of the whole mix.
Great, thank you very much, Eddie. We'll move on to the next. Oh, sorry, go on.
I mean, if you have a digital board, then in a way that's a big tick for providing some of your digital resources. And actually, it doesn't mean that you can't have mini whiteboards, or quite a lot of schools kind of get a board and they just paint it with the blackboard paint so that children can be chalking outside. So actually, I don't think it affects the ability. I think actually it enhances it if you have different types. So I think you could have a digital, a whiteboard, and a blackboard. So we're going for gold standard, aren't we? Right?
Yeah.
Why not? Let's have them all. Okay, so our next question is kind of on the same topic of a small size classroom, but this one is asking for advice around how we can support risk-taking in a smaller environment. So Alison, do you have any thoughts on how to encourage risk-taking when you have limited space?
I think it is about really making your environment work for you. So, so sometimes when I go into environments, the tables, the chairs, the stations, whether it's the kind of where the trays are, they're set up in a really safe way. And often people will say, now we've set them up like this so that children don't bump into them. And I say, but then you're not encouraging and developing spatial awareness. So actually, I think start really small. It's about it's almost like making your classroom or your setting into an obstacle course, because children need to be able to navigate around. It's one of the things that you can really kind of tell a difference between an earlier setting and kind of a primary lower secondary setting, where quite often it's a little bit more kind of controlled and regimented. I actually want to kind of find it quite tricky to navigate around the classroom, because then I know that children are developing spatial awareness. If they're developing spatial awareness, it's then about encouraging that risk taking. So I would be doing, activities like, let's get all of the bricks out and let's build the tallest tower. Now, what happens when they get really tall? They're going to fall over. Well, are you going to be in the way? Because was it sensible to build it on the table? Should we build it on the floor? So I think really thinking about some of the activities that you can set up, start to develop children. You want them to kind of say, oh, actually, if I put this one on, it's going to fall. I mean, to be honest, they all love that anyway. But it's about kind of, is it, are you standing in a safe place for them to fall, for example? What about standing on a chair to reach something? I think it's about developing that risk taking, but we absolutely want children to develop risk taking. So, go for it, but just make sure that you've got your safe parameters there.
Thank you, Alison. Some great ideas there. Our next question is about the sand and water area. So this teacher says, I have a fear regarding the sand and water area, as sometimes the explorers move in there to cause a mess with a twinkle in their eye. So how can we manage such from occurring? And I guess, do we want to avoid mess, or is that part of the process?
I think you've got to see mess as being purposeful, playful approach. I think that's one of those things, isn't it? Yeah, you got to let go. There's got to be mess. That is part of the early years curriculum and pedagogy and framework. So I think that's kind of our adult anxieties coming into kind of that playful pedagogy. I think what I would do is absolutely let them play, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't have classroom rules, and it definitely encourages tidy up time. So I was doing a course yesterday, not for Cambridge, by the way, please, it wasn't, but it was an early years course, and we were talking about the importance of having tidy up time, because tidy up time, particularly in early years, is as important as getting out all of the resources, because it encourages children to put the resources back in the correct place. We were looking at having if I've got 5 pots, where do the pots go? Well, you've got a shadow, like a cutout circle on a particular table. The pots all have to go back on the shadow. So we're helping with patterning, we're helping with spatial awareness, but we're doing tidying up. So I would say go for it in terms of sand and water, within a limit. We're not going to be throwing the sand in at people's faces, because that's a hazard and that would be harmful to our eyes. Same with the water, but they are going to make a mess, but they are also responsible for tidying it up as well.
That's a great idea, Alison. We're on the hour, but I'm going to squeeze one more question in for you all, because there's so many great ones coming through. So if a certain area is popular with children, do we give them a certain amount of time in it and then ask them to move on? Like, do you have any thoughts on that, Alison?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, if an area is popular, win-win. You've really, really done your job well. And so if all of the children are going to that area, clearly there's kind of, there's certain things that we need to put in place. So absolutely, I would set a sand timer. I would say, first of all, I'd pose the problem to the children. I mean, that is a brilliant problem-solving opportunity. So I'd get all of the children together and say, oh, great, we're all going to this area, but what's the problem? And, get them to say, well, there's too many people, we can't share the resources, and then say to them, what should we do about it? If you can empower the children to make as many decisions for you with your environment, with some of the areas, the pedagogy that you're doing, they will actually solve it for you. Ultimately, they will say, well, let's all have a timer. And you say, great, well, have we got any timers? Where are the timers? How are we going to do it? That type of thing. So get them to problem solve it. But yes, ultimately, I would give them a time, but I'd get them to come up with that idea.
Fabulous. Thank you, Alison. So that's all we have time for today. Thank you for all of your wonderful questions, and apologies if we didn't get around to answering yours. Thanks to Alison for taking the time to present and answer questions, and also thank you to Eddie for taking the time to join us as well. So that just leaves me to say, have a fantastic day wherever you are. And thank you again on behalf of Cambridge University Press and Assessment. Goodbye for now.